There was a channel I was recently watching. In like the first video, the guy's like using like AI. I'm able to like have more scripts faster, put them out so I can put more videos out more often.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, sure. And I'm listening to the videos and going, yep, I can tell this is AI generated because.
So, Alex, I wanted to do a little bit of a soapbox up at the front. Not so much so that we can do an indictment of something like we usually do, but to discuss something that has been more on my mind of late. As you might know, Unreal Engine 5.2 just got released, and ever since 5 came out, the realism of games has started to get a little bit more blurry. By the time they've come to 5.2, there are, like diffusion shaders for light refraction. They've created more realistic light refraction in glass so that you can actually see mirrored reflections of the landscape behind you. The suite that they've come up with in 2 is also to procedurally generate as you move elements around a map so that it automatically changes, pathways and everything like that. Get rocks and stuff going underneath the wheels of a truck and all sorts of really impressive stuff. But it has gotten people to ask, is there a level of realism that is going to become a problem in the next
Absolutely
couple of years?
not. This is what we got full VR for.
That's true. I can't wait to have the game where I have to fight a shark underwater.
Oh, don't tempt
VR.
them. They'll make it.
Yeah, they will, and I am not going to be happy. But to kind of give you an idea, I don't know if you had seen this, but there was a trailer a couple months ago for a game called Unrecord that released a trailer video.
So, fun fact.
Yeah.
I didn't want to down your bluster because you wanted to talk about this, but I have seen it.
Okay, you have.
Because some Internet Gamers a couple weeks ago talked about Unrecord.
Yeah.
And Unreal 5.2. So, I'm familiar with this topic.
Okay, so you and I have both seen this. Okay.
Yes, but if you have not seen the trailer for Unrecord, hopefully Nathan will post that link in the description for you. Yes. It is a, body cam? It's not horror.
So no, it's not horror. It's a first-person shooter is what it's based on, but it is done in a certain style where it's made to look like body cam footage of an officer or an agent of some kind that's going into that's going into hostile territory essentially.
Yeah.
And it's built. I think the thing that really lends to the realism is the fact that it actually feels like shaky cam footage on, like on an actual body cam, and the movement and the motion and everything are more realistic than your typical first-person shooter. So, having seen that, and maybe seeing a lot of the actual tech demos of the stuff that's there, I came to the conclusion that we're at that point where realism gets a little blurrier than in previous. Like, we used to have conversations where we were like, wow, the graphics are getting very realistic, and now it's like, wait, is that actually a game, or am I looking at a video?
Yeah. One of the other things, too, is not the same quite Unreal thing, but there is something called photogrammetry. If you've seen...
No.
Basically, that takes real-world sample photos, like you take thousands of photos and compile them into the game engine. You can do it in like Gary's mod, for instance. Even you can just compile all these photos and build a 3D space using them to render that.
Oh, sure.
And one of the other YouTubers I watched played a Gary's mod map in VR with that, and the thing about the VR, or even just having that loaded in, is it compiles all the images together, so it's almost like AI generated art, kind of. Everything's kind of just a little off,
right?
But it also allows you to go in and like 360 view. You can click on it, and you had to do it in the flat screen, not VR. But you can go into where the picture was taken from each spot, and go in and see real photos stitched together, and just not in a 3D space. You can just like look at what it would look like.
I get you. I get you.
So that's a different level of realism. It's an interesting way, a really cool way if you want to build 3D spaces that are based off real places and has the real aesthetic and everything.
Sure.
But this Unreal Engine being able to do that, and the light work that they've done is really impressive. When I watched the unrecord footage, I was watching it in 1080p, and it was Mudahar and so many ordinary gamers talking about it. I was like, wow, that looks really, really good. That's like the environments, the light work, and just the way that they did this, like pretty much tech demo for it.
Yeah.
It's very impressive.
Yeah. The other night, I went out to dinner with Dad, and Dad's part of the artist groups up in that area. But I was kind of like going, I don't know if you've seen some of the stuff that's come out in digital art, essentially, of the Unreal. So I showed him a couple of those. I actually showed him like the tech demo, so you could see the forest where they're driving the Rivian through that forested landscape for the 5.2 tech demo. And then I showed him some of Unrecord, and I'm like, I'm going to preface this by telling you nothing that is in this video is real.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. And he's watching it and he's like, what? like trying to how are people supposed to tell the difference between reality and fiction at that point? And it's like I had said to him at the time, for the untrained eye, if you're just watching that and you don't know any of the technical aspects of it, it would be almost impossible for you to be able to verify that.
Yeah, and even someone who's a bit more tech savvy or younger who can tell the difference between graphics and just real world footage, it's still really convincing. You just have to know where things gamers would know. The edges, the shadows, it's kind of like with the AI art when you get a person, how you can tell it's not a person is their hands and their faces are really
fingers and the teeth have been really and they're getting better at it. I know, because he was talking about AI art and he was like, they're getting better at the fingers and the teeth, and it's like there are a few other things that you notice, like how people aren't necessarily holding cups correctly, like they're kind of by the fingertip. Like when you really look at those, you're like, something is definitely wrong here.
Right.
There's still uncanny valley for those who've seen, but in the unrecord footage, to get back to that example, because it's a really good one, in those initial sections where they're outside the building, there is a blurry effect on the outside for the tarps and stuff. It's not rendered in a very clear fashion. And if you were to get away from the realistic movement that your character is doing, and it was played straight the way that Battlefield games or Call of Duty was, you'd probably be able to focus more on the actual textures and the graphics and stuff like that would seem off to being realistic. But because it's realistic motion, your brain focuses on the fact that you're moving around that environment. It feels more like that. But so many of the technical aspects that they're able to do, especially things that you usually can pick up on, like light refraction, or when it came to the metahuman stuff that they're working on, where it's muscle deformation and even realistic tongue movement and such, that blurs that uncanny valley where you can actually, map muscle structure underneath skin of models to do a 1-to-1 ratio. I think her name is Melina Juergens from Ninja Theory. She plays Senwa in Senwa's Sacrifice. They had her do a 5-second reel basically in front of a camera of different, facial movement and everything like that. And then in a matter of just a couple minutes, they map keyframes and they get what they called her metahuman DNA, and they put a digital version of her up on the screen to reproduce it. And it's really, really good. it's I can tell that it's not a real person, but it's such a good representation that you can instantly recognize who it is. All of those facial movements and expressions are the same as I just saw with the person themselves. And then the other thing that's really impressive is that in older games, even in the original 5 engine, they had a thing where if you pull out, because of how graphics work in games, there'd be billboarding of like trees or anything. If you get far enough away from a graphic, they basically create like a 2D version of it. And they found a way around that because of what they refer to as nanite technology. It always sounds so fun.
Right.
But nanite technology, where instead of having to do that, the polygons scale up and down. So you never need like more or less. You will always be able to have the same number of polygons for an object, and you just get to scale back and back and back, so you will never need to actually billboard or decomplicate any of your graphics. They can be just as complex and be as far away or as close to you as you want. It's just that the polygons will scale accordingly, which means that we're at the point where so many of the graphics are essentially math. It's essentially math at this point, which might be good for file sizes, I don't know, but it's impressive in a way that one, kind of blurs the line of reality and also makes you think about how much a smaller and smaller group of people can do with that technology, which also gets me worried about what that's actually going to do to game design.
Yeah.
'Cause,
The funny thing about all this in the Unreal 5.2 and that all the rendering and the light work that they've done,
yeah.
and I don't remember the name of the lights, the light sourcing that
Lumen.
they did. Lumen, thank you,
Lumen,
the Lumen. The funniest thing about that is that Fortnite is now using it.
Yes. Yes, they are.
So when people are like, "Oh, Fortnite sucks," or it's Fortnite, but it's like,
From a technical
but yeah, Fortnite's taking advantage of like the latest in Unreal tech, and it's actually kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Fortnite, I've played Fortnite, and
I have not. I refuse.
it is not my type of game. For what it does, I will give you this. If you're looking for Battle Royale, it's probably the best iteration of that you could get.
I am not, thankfully, looking for Battle Royales.
Exactly, and I don't want them. So it's not my cup of tea. But one thing that you can't really say about Fortnite is that they don't utilize the best technology that they possibly can, because they will implement it almost immediately. Epic wants to make sure to, from a technical aspect especially, that it's the best it can be.
I think there was another body cam game, maybe Mudahar was just saying that, a body cam like horror game.
Yes.
I don't know if there's one being made, but something like that using this engine, would absolutely terrifying.
There was a compilation that they did about trailers that are done in Unreal 5, and some of them were like essentially tech demos for what you could do as a horror game. And I have to tell you that it physically made me like stress up, I physically got upset when like the weird stalky monster is going through the forest and you're in the forest, and then then it starts crawling towards you and you're running, and the camera is shaking as you're trying to get back to the cabin. And the other one I think was where you're in the that one is freaky. I don't remember what it's called, but it's like you're in the house and the lights start going out, and you go downstairs, and the pot's like, you hear these rumbling noises, and then you get downstairs into the kitchen, and the pot has fallen over, and there's like a rumbling in the other room, and this figure like is almost looking at you from around the corner, and it is freaky. It is terrifying. Yeah, horror is going to be definitely a very different experience for people as we come up in this. But yeah, no, I think the other thing, like I was mentioning a little earlier, is I can also see this being where a lot of game companies, because AAA game companies being what they are, will now see this as being able to create games with smaller staffs and be able to lay a lot of people off because procedural generation can take care of a lot of this stuff. The tech demo that they even showed for 5.2 was where they were like, this one area that's like 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers was painstakingly made by the team. But then we can procedurally generate out like 200 kilometer by 200 kilometer space with just a handful of inputs of just going how many trees, how many mountains, how many structures do you want in this area past that. With just a handful of
The thing
inputs.
about procedural generation, different topic for a different time.
Yeah.
Everything is different, but everything is very samey with it.
It can be. Yeah, absolutely. I have a feeling that so much of that is so that it has realistic backdropping past the world that you're actually in. But the thing that is impressive is where they're like moving around mountains, and you can do that as a curated experience, but then the world then just changes to fit. So you don't have to like remap everything. The demo that they had shown, that the Rivian trailer, was where you get to this open area of the riverbed, and I want to drop like a cliff into the middle, and they drop a cliff into the middle, and then all the textures and everything just procedurally generates around wherever you place it. But then you say, I want to move this over here so that you can go straight through here, and you move it over. The log that's fallen across the way, that disappears. They go over here. The river then starts flowing back into this area, and your area's over there. And it's done in a matter of seconds to completely remap that landscape with just a single input of drag and drop over. So you don't need people.
It's going to be, the next generation of games is going to be pretty interesting.
Very soon, we are going to have a game that is made completely artificially, like where they put like a line of code into the thing that says "make fun game."
Yeah, no, see, this is a completely different topic at this point, but the problem with that is going to be soulless and repetitive.
Yes.
And I was listening to something earlier where it's like, ChatGPT or whatever, GPT and whatnot, it can use words really well, but it can't plan forward.
Right. Which is, I tried to explain that even to Dad, because it was like, with ChatGPT, like, what could they do? Stuff like that. And I was like, well, there is a problem with that, which is the idea that you still have to have something that a human aggregated in order for it to create something. With no human input, ChatGPT can't actually do anything. like it needs to be able to get something from somewhere. Any of the Mid-Journey, any of the AI art stuff, they have to be able to get assets from people that created them to begin with, and they can only emulate it in what is essentially not just soulless, like you were saying, but also just reiterative in a way that the AI doesn't really understand. The AI doesn't really get what the purpose or the function of it is. They just know that they can emulate the look of something.
Yeah, it's basically, you tell it the format it wants and it regurgitates information in a format that you ask for. It doesn't know what it's doing. It doesn't think forward. So if you wanted to do a game, for instance, sure, you could tell it to make a game and it could probably make a game. But for like story, it's not going to be able to take the things it did here and then use that to generate more things based upon that. It's not going to generate like a story that follows a story arc.
No, and it's going to really struggle with also like the curated experience of actually, feeling the intensity of something and really, ingratiating yourself to the player, having an absorbing experience. And it's also going to have a problem with innovation. Because it can only take stuff that exists already. It can remold them into different ways, but it can't really innovate in new and exciting ways that people are looking for. But again, from an outside observer standpoint, You could do that, like I've seen people that are kind of like looking at script writing or the stuff from Midjourney and going, wow, this is like through the looking glass. For the outside observer who's not familiar with it or doesn't really analyze it, it looks close enough as approximation for them to think that it's good. As far as just the engine itself, going back to the Unreal Engine, the utilization of that suite is going to lead to a lot of conversations I think we're going to have over the next year or two with people who don't necessarily play games or don't actually, do any kind of interactive arts that will swear that this was real.
Yeah.
And that's going to be an interesting conversation for everybody out there to have with them. I definitely am going to just try to analyze a lot of those for myself to see if I can better explain to them why it isn't, just for future reference. And that's one of the reasons I'll drop a link to Unrecord in the description down below so people can see it, and maybe you can analyze it better than I can. Feel free to leave a comment in the description, a comment below the video too, if you see something specific that you can use as a focal point on that. Are you concerned for the future, Alex? Are we going into the Matrix?
No. I was literally listening to something about this at work earlier, and I'm not concerned. There was a channel I was recently watching. In like the first video, the guy's like using like AI. I'm able to like have more scripts faster, put them out so I can put more videos out more often. And I'm like, okay, sure. And I'm listening to the videos and going, yep, I can tell this is AI generated because just the way some of the words are here and there, and occasionally it's just that. But they're also using like AI generated like voice, like deepfake almost, their own voice, I'm sure. Maybe, it might not be their own voice, who knows? But like they're using an AI generated voice on an AI generated script, and I'm just like, this feels so soulless. It has, the inflections are wrong. You can tell when the word is it's spelled wrong or has a space in the wrong thing, so it says it the way it's written.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of boring. And I thought at one point, one of the videos was like talking about AI taking over something. And I'm like, funny that your video that happens to talk about like Roko's Basilisk and like the AI taking over and killing people or whatever, making traders useless. It's funny that you've mentioned this in your video. I'm sure you didn't read your entire script.
Like an imitation of something that's artistic, because artistic stuff is supposed to be an expression. And it's very hard for a machine to express themselves. One day, maybe. I don't think they're there yet. But for the idea of using tools to create more realism for people to actually build off of, that's going to be much harder for people to suss out the difference between reality and fiction.